and welcome to Jennifer Knatters. I am Jennifer and this is my knitting and nattering video podcast. Today is the 8th of September, I think, possibly pretty close to that. Excuse me, little hiccup. It has been a while. I don't know if you're a returning viewer and you watched the last episode, you would have heard me saying, oh, I don't know why I have a bit of a frog in my throat. Turns out that night I lost my voice and had laryngitis for another 2 weeks again, which made 4 out of the 6 weeks of the summer holidays that I had laryngitis, and I had very different colds with both of them. So that was fun and exciting. And then since then, my pumpkins have started school. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jennifer. I live in northern Scotland with my husband, 2 cats, and 2 children in descending order of age. And 3 cats now. One of them, we don't know how old he is. We'll get to that. So my 2 children started school. They are now in P1 and P5. Since then, I've just been sufficiently busy that I have not had a chance to sit down and talk with you. And I have missed it. And I have been getting a bit jittery and not being able to relax for wanting to do this and having various reasons why every day it wasn't a good idea. So hopefully today is a good idea. I apologize for noise. Our neighbors are doing some kind of construction. I think I can hear more construction in the distance. It's raining off and on. It was raining really heavily earlier, so hopefully it'll just stick to a drizzle. The sun came out for a while and I was like, oh, the sun is not too bright, but just good light for a video podcast. And then by the time I got everything ready, it was raining again. So these things happen. Anyway, let's get in it. If you are a new viewer, welcome. If you are a returning viewer, welcome back. I am so happy to sit and talk about my knitting and what's been going on in my life, drink some tea. My tea is in fact pink. I don't know how well that's showing up, but it is pink. It is Black Forest cake, possibly Black Forest Gâteau. I don't know. I can't remember if they use the French or not. Anyway, it is Black Forest cake tea from Bird and Blend. I've been getting, ostensibly for my husband's birthday, I think. I signed him up for the Bird and Blend tea club. And he gets the rooibos and I get the black and green teas. I don't like rooibos. I know a lot of people do. I can't be getting on with it. I don't even, I accidentally made a cup of rooibos once and I had to dump it out outside. I'm that not good with rooibos. I just can't handle the smell. It does something weird inside my head that's just very off-putting, which is neither here nor there. My husband likes it, so now I can get the regular club. I wish they did, and they have a caffeine-free club where you get rooibos and herbal teas and fruit teas, but they don't have an only caffeine club where you never get the rooibos or the herbals or the fruit teas. And I don't mind the herbals and the fruits, but I do prefer my tea to actually have tea in it. That was a bit of a tangent. Black Forest cake, delicious. No, red velvet. There is a Black Forest cake, I think, but this is red because it is red velvet. Oh my goodness, Jennifer. I don't even know what to do with me. And this is a keep cup if anyone cares. Keep cup. I need to buy new lids because all my lids are falling apart and dying. Most of them are missing these little things on the inside now. So I don't know. I started drinking these when my 5-year-old Rainbow was a baby, so that if she knocked over my teacup, which she was always trying to grab things, and she was very much that it would only spill a tiny bit instead of spilling the whole thing. And that also had the advantage that it kept my tea warm, given that I could rarely just sit down and have a cup of tea when it was the perfect temperature. And now I have discovered I just like drinking from them mostly for the perfect temperature reasons. With a regular cup of tea, there's a moment when you have, like when it's just right. And because this is a double walled insulated cup, that moment lasts a lot longer. It can sometimes take longer to get to, but it lasts a lot longer. And the volume. I am now so used to making tea in this volume that every time I'm faced with making tea in like a different size teacup, I don't entirely know what I'm doing. This is an awful long tangent to say hello, welcome. I hope you enjoy hanging out with me. I hope you like long tangents about random things. If not, this is possibly not the knitting podcast for you. If so, we'll probably get on great. It is now raining a bit heavier. To start with, finished objects, I have finished my, oh goodness, do I know the name of the pattern? I will put it below. I don't think I've ever managed to come up with the pattern name while doing this podcast. I've been knitting on it for, I think I started it early enough in the summer that there's been 2 podcasts where I was working on it. Possibly only the one. I can tell you about the yarn. The yarn was that a Kingfisher is the colorway on the, I think it's quinag base, Quinag, which is a mountain here in Scotland. I am from California originally, if that is not clear. I do not have a native understanding of how to pronounce things, and I'm very sorry if I got it wrong. It is 100% BFL 4-ply, high twist. The color was that a Kingfisher, and this is from Ripples Crafts. And obviously I am sitting down and you can't see much of it, although I think the most interesting part is these lace sleeves. I'll put in a picture of me wearing it in a bit, but the construction is you knit the lace to a certain point and then put those on hold, and then knit the lace on the other side to a certain point. I'm sorry, I'm looking at myself in the camera to make sure I'm pointing at the correct places. And then you pick up and knit, you knit around the back, you start with one side and you knit across, and then you pick up the stitches along the front, and then you knit across the other sleeve, so it probably goes this way, knit across that way, and then across the side, and then join to knit in the round until you get to put the sleeve stitches on hold. And then you knit, cast on stitches in the underarm and knit round and round and round and round and round. I did the beginning of the sleeves with one skein, and then once I had the second and picked up to join in the round, I started alternating skeins in the helical method, and then I knit down until I had like 30 grams of the first skein left and broke the yarn so that I could use it in my sleeves. And then I knit the rest and striped in a third skein of yarn, and I still have about 45 grams left of that third skein. So I knit round and round and round and round and round until I got to around the point where I wanted an accurate measurement for the length. And then I went back and picked up and knit it's a seed stitch or a moss stitch. It's knit one, purl one, and then the next round is purl one, knit one. And then it is an I-cord bind off. And then I finished the body and, decided how long I wanted it. And then, I don't know, at some point I went and did the sleeves, and I finished the sleeves before going back and doing the I-cord bind off. So yeah, I think I finished the sleeves in skeins 1 and 2, and then I needed just a little bit. I basically ran out of skeins 1 and 2 finishing the sleeves, and then skein 3 I finished I think I did 1 or 2 more rows of the moss stitch, seed stitch, I don't remember. I think one of them is called moss stitch. The 1 by 1 and then all 2. This stitch pattern is called moss stitch in either the US or the UK. And it is called something else in the other place. And then moss stitch is a knit to, purl to, purl to, knit to. So that's why I'm very confused and I don't know which one it is, but seed stitch, moss stitch, whatever it is, it's pretty. It gives it structure. There's a lot less on the sleeves. I really like the length, which is just above my elbows. I love the color. It's a very variegated color, but it doesn't look like there's no big splodges of any one color from any distance. It just looks like a really rich tealy color with lots of layers in it. So yeah, that's I don't think I made any modifications. I knit a size 7, and then once I had like that much of length, maybe like that much. Once I had a couple of inches of in the round, I washed it and measured it, and I'm way off on gauge, but it was still going to come out as a wearable size, which it has done. I knew I didn't want it to be as oversized as the pattern calls for. I find a lot of the oversized stuff is based on a fairly small bust size and a fairly slender frame. And I think for the aesthetic that I like, as you get bigger, you need less positive ease. And especially like if you have huge tracts of land, as the euphemism was in the Monty Python days of my youth, that should not be included in the amount of positive ease. Like the positive ease should be measured from, you know, your hips or your tummy or something else, so that this just kind of fits into the size. So I think the way it is, I do have a bit, I mean, I have positive ease the whole way through. I just don't have like the 6 inches. I think the pattern recommended like 6 to 10 inches. You can really see the wind and the rain are blowing around out there. So yeah, this is my second t-shirt of the summer in a wool. I did the blueprint one earlier in Carol Fella's Nua, her sport weight. And yeah, I haven't had a whole lot of time to wear this yet. I only finished it towards the end of last week. I think I finished it to wear on Friday, and then for various reasons I couldn't record a podcast Friday, even though like I got all dolled up and ready, and then I can't remember what happened, but I was not able to record a podcast. When it is humid, it feels a bit itchy, so I wear it over another t-shirt, and I'm hoping to be able to wear it as a layering piece as it gets a little colder, like maybe over a long sleeve shirt, though I don't know yet how that's going to feel. It feels fine over a t-shirt. That's about the same sleeve length, but we'll see. Yeah, I'm really happy to have it. I am so delighted. It is gorgeous. I did wash it. I think I need to wash and block it again because I don't feel like the stitches are the most even. By washing and blocking, I mean I soaked it in water, I spun it out in my washing machine, and then I draped it over a radiator to dry. And even with the lace, I did not pin block it. I did not do anything, you know, I just smoothed it to be even. I was in a bit of a hurry to be able to wear it that day. Like I said, I was hoping to record a podcast, but it didn't happen. So I think the stitches just need a little more evening out. I could really tell from where I had, when I blocked it so I could measure my gauge to start with. And then when I knit the rest, like there was a huge difference in the way the stitches, like how flat they laid and how smooth they were versus the rest was just a really bumpy mess. I would happily knit this again in a different yarn. The yarn it's pictured in is a tweedy one, a 4-ply tweed, so that would be a much softer yarn with neps in it. I don't get on well with neps. I constantly am like, oh, there's a little bit of flip, oh, and pull them out, which like once you accept that's just who you are as a person, you know, not to buy tweedy nep yarn for yourself. But I would knit it again in like 100% merino or maybe something a little fuzzier, because the one pictured is a little bit fuzzier. This is a high twist yarn. And yeah, I enjoyed knitting it. I am enjoying wearing it. I love the color. I have a skein and a half left because I kind of just bought a sweater quantity of yarn with no particular sweater in mind. But I think, I don't know, if I'd done longer sleeves but a narrower fit, would I have been able to do it in 3 skeins? I don't entirely know. And yeah, that's everything I can say about this pattern, given I cannot remember the name of the pattern. I can see the cover picture. What was it called? We may never know. I mean, we obviously will. I will look it up, and I hopefully have at some point put it down below, and I will include the pictures I took of myself standing outside. I know I never take pictures of myself wearing my finished knitwear. I finally got around to doing that. My next finished project is one I worked, not finished object, I don't have any other finished objects. My next work in progress is one I showed. I think I had finished one and started the other, and then I got to the heel turn, and the heel turn is such a perfect part of knitting socks. If you have not knit socks, the heel turn is the magic. I know a lot of people do short row or afterthought socks, and then you don't get the magic. But knitting a top down heel turn and gusset sock, this is a square or Dutch heel with a reinforced, I just did a slip stitch pattern to reinforce the bottom of the heel, give it a little extra cushion. And then the next stage is to pick up these stitches on the side. That creates the gusset that does the decreases. It's hard to show since it's on my, what if I move it onto the needles? That'll give it a little bit of structure. I moved this off the pony needles that I was knitting it with that I bought when I was at the beach and forgot my knitting. I have moved it to these, which are, I think, Knit Pro Zings. I don't like them very much because the join is rough. And I don't know if that's just because I got a less than great pair. A lot of other people have said they really enjoy Zings for knitting socks, but I don't think they're knitting on the 2.0 millimeter needles like I am. So maybe, I don't know. I have never felt the need to buy another pair to see how it's working out. Though if they had had the Zings instead of the ponies, I would have bought them. But yeah, it's just, you put half the stitches on hold, you knit a flap, then you knit short rows in the bottom to make this changed shape, and that gives you the back of the heel. And now you've gone from knitting a tube up and down to knitting a tube going the other direction. Knitting is physics and advanced math and magic, but you don't even have to really think about it. Certainly once you know what you're doing, you just get really cool things like socks that actually fit a body, because knitting is making not just fabric, but making fabric in specific shapes to follow the human form. Is the rain dying down a bit? I hope so. My next work in progress is almost finished, and that is another pair of shorty socks. These ones are knit in Regia cotton blend 4-ply. This is a mixed berry color, and I finished one. I know I showed it to you last time. I've almost finished the second one since my other, the blue sock, I didn't tell you what yarn the other blue sock was in. It's a Rico Design Merino linen polyamide blend, hemp blend. My other socks. merino linen silk. So these ones, which I picked up at a local yarn shop at the beach when I forgot my own knitting. These ones are a Regia 4-ply cotton blend. It's hard to tell you about it because Regia Tutti Fruity. I have almost finished. I am doing toe decreases. On this one I started the toe decreases a bit late, which is why it has such a wide wedge toe. I don't care. I certainly don't care enough to pull it back. It's getting dark in here, isn't it? I certainly don't care enough to pull it back to get a more gracefully pointed toe in the way that people expect socks to look. So that's fine. And I'm now working on the other one. Let me just finish this row because I started it when it was raining too much to talk. I don't know that it was raining too much to talk, but I didn't want to talk and then find it was all useless. Come on, toe decrease. There we go. See, shaping a little. And this one is, I'm using my Audi, I don't know if they're Audi sock or Audi lace or what they are, again, 2.0 millimeter needles. Not my favorites, but perfectly fine for knitting socks. I probably need to steam the cable to dekink them, which is a thing that works. So yeah, these should be done by the next podcast, and I will probably already be wearing them for running. I have one other pair of cotton socks and I have to wear them inside out because the bumps are just too rough on my precious little feet. They feel like I'm being exfoliated while I walk, which is fine if you're only walking a little, but if you're like going for a run, that might be too much. But these feel a lot softer in my hands than the other one, which I think was an opal cotton blend. So I will knit them and I will try them running, and I may just try them inside out because it's no real difference. Maybe wear them right side out for walking around before I wear them right side out running. Doot, doot, doot. Those are the whips I have shown you before. Having finished a lace detail t-shirt, I cast on another lace detail t-shirt. This one is the Roseability by Victoria Marchant. Ooh, I am halfway through a row. Of course I am halfway through a row. It doesn't really matter because I'm just working on a sheet of the back. This is being knit in some deep stash yarn. I apologize for the crinkling. It has been living in this bag in the bottom of my knitting stash. I keep my knitting stash in plastic tubs. This was in the plastic tub all the way at the bottom, but, and I feel this is important, it was in the first tub I opened to look for it. They're not numbered or labeled or anything useful that would, you know, like I could make a list of my stash somewhere and say, these are in tub 1, these are in tub 2, which is a brilliant idea that I should actually do, and there's no way I would ever keep up with it. It is Louisa Harding Mulberry Silk. Maybe Mulberry is the, I don't think Mulberry is the name of the color. I think it's Louisa Harding Mulberry Silk. This yarn was a gift. It was a gift at our wedding, but it wasn't a wedding present. One of my friends had come and it was the yarn she was using for the knitting she was working on her trip. She finished the knitting, had a lot of extra yarn, did not feel like figuring out what to do with it or taking it back home, so she gifted it to me. I have been married 2011, so 11 years. I've been married 11 years. Our anniversary was this summer, and we should have known. For some reason, I thought last year was not our 10th wedding anniversary, but it was, and we didn't do anything. This year, I think we went out for lunch together. Yeah, because it was our wedding anniversary is the last week before summer holidays start. So we took an afternoon and went out to lunch at a nice restaurant that has a patio. And it wasn't on the day of our anniversary, but it was that week. And so yeah, that's the most we've done since we had kids, really. When for our first wedding anniversary, we went back to the hotel where we got married, the Athol Palace Hotel in Pitlochry, and they upgraded us to a suite and gave us a bottle of champagne, or it probably wasn't champagne, it was probably just bubbly wine. But yeah, it was very sweet of them, and I couldn't drink it because I was pregnant. I think I had one token sip. So Chris drank most of it, pulling faces the whole time because we are not big fizzy wine drinkers. But it was still a very nice gesture on their part. Yeah, so we went out for lunch for our wedding anniversary, and yeah, so this has been in my stash for 11 years, and I am finally knitting it up. I had looked at various patterns and the yardage never quite worked out. So the nice thing about the Roseability is the back is just plain knitting. And then, in fact, my instructions right now are to knit for 16 inches. Like, it does not get more plain knitting than this. 16 inches or desired length. And then the front is a really pretty lace pattern. I do have some lace jumpers. I don't tend to wear them very much because if it's warm enough to need a jumper, if it's cold enough to need a jumper, then it's usually too cold to need a lace jumper. But this one is specifically intended to be a layering piece. I'm doing it in silk. And I figure, it's supposed to be a cropped one anyway. So I will use probably this one as a basis for how long to make it. And then it's drop shoulders, so the sleeves can be whatever length you want them to be. And yeah, the amount of yardage I have is within the amount recommended for the size I am knitting, the size sleeves I'm knitting. I can hear a bandsaw now and it's annoying me. I hope you can't hear it as well as I can. The size I'm knitting, the full sleeve length in my size for my arms. Yeah, but we'll see how I feel about it. I will say so far, I am not really enjoying knitting with silk. This has a gorgeous shine. It is not quite this much of an orange tone red in person, but it is still a warm red, and I am a cool red. You can really see the rowing out that's happening here. And again, I figured I would knit, like I can hold it up to myself and I can see that it doesn't really show right now, but it is wide enough that it goes from shoulder to shoulder. So as far as sizing goes, that's fine. When I finish the first ball, I will wash and block it again, lay it flat to dry, and measure what I'm getting, just so then I know, like, how much did it measure it first, wash it, and then know, like, how much does it grow. It is silk, so it should, it'll stretch a lot this way. Yeah, and because I can knit the front in a different size, and I can put extra room in there, and then the extra room is where I actually need it, and not all in the back, because that is the one thing with this one and the blueprint that I knit earlier, is they both have, for their chest circumference, it's the same, the garment is the same front and back. I am not the same front and back. And this one, I could have changed blueprint because that one's straightforward enough. But with this one, I didn't really know how to adjust it. I can do it with a circular yoke. I can do it with a bunch of other different kind of things, including drop shoulder. I don't entirely know how to do it with this specific, the saddle shoulder and the way they were picked up and knit in the round, because it was just picking up the stitches. So I would have had to make like the front longer than the back. I don't know. Maybe just picked up more stitches. That probably would have done it. And fewer stitches in the back. I probably just figured it out. Anyway, with this one, I can make the front bigger. I can either do a larger size or just the way the lace opens up. I know the way the lace opens up isn't counted for in the pattern, but if my gauge is wildly off, I have room to play with it, is what I'm saying. If it's going to be narrower than I'm hoping, which I think it is, not hoping, narrower than the pattern specifies, which I believe it is, then that just means I can do a slightly bigger size in the front, come out with the same size finished garment, and yeah. Does that make sense? Can you tell I haven't talked to anyone about knitting in a while? My tea has almost slipped to the point where it is too cold to be really nice. But yeah, I am not really loving working with the silk. The color isn't entirely my favorite, but I think it'll be just a nice kind of late summer autumnal one. And I mean, look at that sheen. That is gorgeous. But yeah, I will see how I'm doing, and if I finish it and I find like I just never reach for it, I can rehome it. That's a thing I can do. And I will have used stash and I will have given it away, and that means the stash isn't still living in my cupboard, just in a different form, which admittedly is the ideal way for stash to live in my cupboard. But yeah, those are the 3 things I have been working on. I was just realizing today that with my leftover yarn from this, I could probably knit a Musselburgh hat by Isolde Teague, which is the one where you knit, you knit out, knit a long tube, knit in again, pop it inside, pull it on, fold it over, which makes a really warm hat because you wind up with several layers trapping air. And that I could even use, I knit this I think on a 3.0 millimeter, so I could do like a 3.0 or 2.75 and get a nice fabric that's not sock thickness. So yeah, I'm thinking about that. I have another skein that I got from Lonely Knitter. It was a grab bag, you get whatever color you get. And it is like a soft sea foam, which I'm hoping to make a Musselburgh for my 9-year-old because they are going swimming on Fridays. And the council is paying for the swimming lessons, but the school can't afford a school bus. So they are walking to the leisure center. I feel like I've mentioned this before. I think my last podcast was the first week they went back to school. So I knew this already, that they were going to be doing it. So on the Fridays, they walk from our house. It is 3 miles to the leisure center. They go a slightly different route and they are a tiny bit closer. So let's say like 2.5 miles. It might even be as little as 2 miles, but I don't know off the top of my head. They walk to the swimming pool and then they go swimming and then they come back in time for lunch with wet hair in northern Scotland. And it's going to go through into, I think early November. Kitten is like me. She has a lot of really thick hair. So I want to give her a really thick wool hat. Wool stays warm even if it's wet. It traps body heat. And I have some Fiber Space Cumulus, which is the fuzzy alpaca silk blend. That's also, it's a slightly more gray toned sea foam, but I figure even if I only have enough to do half of the musselburgh in it, because it's a partial skein, it's left over from one of the Arnold Culliford knitting projects, I think from the first year, A Year of Techniques, where we did the Bristol Ivy shawl in the different colors of the Fiber Space Cumulus, but they're color blocked as you go. There was a lot going on in that. That was the Intarsia lesson. But I still have the kind of the grayish sea foamy one. So if I can do half the hat, then she can choose if she wants the fuzzy size in or the fuzzy side out and fold it up, and it'll be extra warm and make enough space that she can kind of tuck all of her hair up in it. That's what I'm hoping anyway. We will see what actually happens. I didn't cast it on because I want to finish at least one pair of socks, which I almost have. It's the other pair of socks. I wanted to finish at least one pair of socks because I am not really a 2 pair of socks person, and I do have a couple other pairs of socks that have been put aside for seasonal reasons, like ones that are in Christmas yarn. When it got to like end of January, I put them away because I could work on socks that were more seasonably apropos. Excuse me, that I wouldn't just finish and put in a box for 11 months, 10 months. So yeah, I've got a couple of almost finished Christmas socks, although one of them I think I might wind up having to pull out and redo. That's neither here nor there. And I've got a pair of pinkish purple socks that are a very complicated cable pattern that makes them look like they have little hearts down the side. It's a Hunter Hammerson pattern that is no longer available because Hunter Hammerson has pulled her catalog and relaunched, or is going to relaunch as an entirely new thing. Very excited to see what that is. I think she hasn't relaunched it yet. But yeah, so I still have all the patterns of hers that I've previously bought, but any ones that aren't already in your library are no longer available for purchase, which is fine. That's absolutely a thing a person can decide to do if she doesn't want to support her back catalog of patterns that don't sell very well and maybe require a lot more support. But yeah, I haven't worked on those enough. They're not something like I can't knit on them while talking to you because every row I'm having to check the chart. I haven't gotten far enough into it to know what I was doing, and I cast them on, I think, like February 2020. Might have been February 2021, but I think it was February 2020. And I haven't really worked on them. They are not a thing that I have the brain space to sit down and work on with my kids home a lot more. But yeah, now that Rainbow is in school full time, if I finish one of these, maybe those can come back into rotation, not as my mindless walking around ones. I do want autumn socks. I have 2 pairs. I've got one pair that's orange and black stripy in a DK weight sock yarn, like big chunky socks, and then they have jack-o'-lanterns on the heels. And I did one so that it's black cuff, heel, and toe with an orange jack-o'-lantern on it, and then like black, orange, black, orange. And the other one I did the other color, although when I wore them like over black tights, then one of them just looked like it was shorter than the other because you couldn't see the difference between the black cuff and the black tights. So it's just where the orange cuff was. So I need to wear them over some other color sock, maybe green socks. And then I have a pair of ribbed, a mock rib. Is that what it is? Or a fisherman rib maybe? And they're orange with green cuffs, like bright orange, like just absolutely a pumpkin-y orange. Those ones are another Ripplecraft color, which was, it's something's beak and feet, and now I can't remember what bird it is, but they're bright orange. And I've got some more like pumpkin spicy kind of colored ones. I am not a very autumnal person, but in color-wise, but I love autumn just like conceptually. So I want to have lots of autumn socks to reach for, which means I need to knit them. And if I want them to wear this year, I need to start knitting them now. So finish this, almost done. Finish the other one, just have the foot to do. Start pumpkin socks. And yeah, hopefully I will get those done. So I've got a whole bunch of stuff I want to work on in the near future. I think I will cast on another jumper because I'm not loving the Roseability, which means I am not working on the Roseability, which is not the Roseability's fault. It's not the pattern's fault. It's just I don't love the yarn. So I'm worried I'm not going to love the finished object. So I'm not putting a whole heck of a lot of oomph into it. So I may pull out another jumper to work on, and like we're gonna go away. My brain just stopped. I've got a train trip coming up, and I can take that as like my train knitting and stuff like that to force myself to work on it. Speaking of train trips, I have booked all my stuff for Glasgow School of Yarn except the train ticket. But I have a hotel room and I have my tickets for Glasgow School of Yarn. I think I mentioned this all last time. I did look at the timing for Perth Festival of Yarn, which from my own location and everything, I would prefer to go to. It's closer. It's a 90-minute train journey rather than a 3.5-hour train journey. There's a lot of really good vendors who'll be there. There's a lot of good vendors who'll be at Glasgow School of Yarn. So as far as I'm concerned, that's a wash, but it's closer. It'd be easier to go to. It's more like my local yarn show, if you can have a local yarn show that takes 90 minutes on a train. But it is this weekend upcoming, and that is also my children's half-term break. And so I can't just, like, I'm doing stuff with my kids, and I can't nip down to Perth for a day. Yeah, so that's kind of where it is. And if you are going to Perth Festival Yarn, I hope you have a lovely time. I hope you squish beautiful things and spend within your budget and come home happy and sharing what you got, because I would love to see people's Perth Festival of Yarn vlogs. And oh, I know what I was going to talk about. I was going to talk about books, because back in February I did a book roundup for January, which I think was 12 books. And then later I was looking at it and I realized there was another book I just hadn't tagged. So I hadn't mentioned it at all as a thing I have read. And then I did not much read anything in February, and I don't know why. I just, like, normally I read when I'm doing bedtime with Rainbow, and she just wouldn't calm down and was just constantly asking things. Like, she'd ask me something and then I couldn't, like, I'd lose my place in what I was doing, you know, I'd be like, this is a conversation for in the morning, now is quiet time. But like, I just couldn't get my brain to pick up again what I was reading. Even though I was interested in what I was reading, like, I wasn't following it. And every time she interrupted, like, I forgot everything. I have not tested positive for COVID, but things like that, like times when I just cannot hold my train of thought, make me wonder if I might have long COVID, if I caught it and didn't notice, or failed to test positive on the test positive days. It's raining again. So I didn't have anything to say really in March. I think I read half a book that I'd mostly, you know, like, I finished it on February 2nd. I think I saw a flash of lightning, but I can't be sure. I didn't hear any thunder, although it could be hard to hear over the rain on the roof. We did have a thunderstorm the other night, and I was so tired I went to sleep at like 10 o'clock, which for me is early. I'm normally a go to sleep at midnight kind of person, if only because I can't usually get both of my children asleep and in their own beds until after 10 o'clock. And then I just need some alone time to sit and knit, which I haven't had in a while. And that's the other reason I've been going a bit stir crazy, besides just not being able to talk to y'all. And so I had just hit one of those sleep phases where you're half awake, but you're not really awake. But if something happens, you would be awake, and you could kind of vaguely remember not being entirely asleep before that. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, was just this enormous crack of thunder right overhead. And I swear it scared me out of a year of my life. I am not meant for those kind of surprises anymore. And that was 11:30, and it was past midnight, or maybe like 11:15, I don't know. It was past midnight before my heart had calmed down enough that I could try going back to sleep. And there's only like 3 or 4 more rumbles of thunder after that, and you could hear them drifting further away before I could trust that it wasn't going to happen again. I honestly expected both of my children to wake up in terror and be in my bed, but they both slept through it just fine. But yeah, we've had a fair amount of rain so far this September. And I guess some places in Scotland, like on the 3rd of September, had already had more than their annually expected rainfall for the month. Their average rainfall for the month of September, they'd already exceeded it, because we have just had some absolute deluges. Yeah, so that's been fun. Rain is good for the garden, right? And I don't know if I really have anything else to say. Oh, I was starting to tell you about books, and then it started raining too hard. So yeah, it took a while before I got my reading mojo back, and I went in it really gently. I reread some Gavriel Kay books. He had a new one come out. That was part of it. He had a new one come out that was set in medieval Italy. And as I was reading it, I was like, some of this sounds familiar. So I got like a third of the way in, and then I went back and read another book that was set in one of his other books that was set in medieval Italy. And I was like, oh yeah, no, some of these are the same characters. And then I finished the first book, and then I went back and read the other book that takes place time-wise. It might even be after those. Yeah, it takes place after them, but it was the first one he wrote. And yeah, I love Gavriel Kay. So that was a gentle thing. I reread the Murderbot books, and I feel like I read some other stuff. I mentioned back in January, I had read the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and I read another book by that author. I brought my Kindle so I could actually talk about these things and remember what all I had read. I will turn it on. Taylor Jenkins Reid is the author, and I read Maybe in Another Life, which was an interesting one because it's about someone who's just moving back from New York to LA, where she grew up, although her family moved away, and she's been bouncing around aimlessly for most of her life. So the night she gets in, her friends have a welcome back party for her, and then it splits based on one decision. So half of the book, you're following her in one timeline where she decided not to hook up with her high school boyfriend, and various things have happened. And in the other timeline, she decided to hook up with her high school boyfriend, who was, possibly the love of her life. And it goes off in that direction, and different things happen, and things play out, and like the same things happen, but they play out in different orders, and various things. And it's just kind of like, in both ways, she winds up happy. But it's just like exploring the ways her life turns out different because of the one decision and things that followed it. And it was interesting, but it wasn't captivating. I reread a bunch of short stories and a few of the books in Seanan McGuire's Encrypted series, because there's a new book that came out in there. And apparently the whole series so far has been leading up to being able to tell this story and like give you enough information. So I read a bunch of that stuff. I reread a bunch of Serena Bowen, her hockey romance series. I read the Middlegame, and then because the second book came out in that series, Seasonal Fears, so I read those. I read The Great Mortality, about the Black Death. Yeah, I've read a fair number of books since then. And then most recently, I've started reading books by Kingfisher, which is Ursula Vernon's pen name for books she writes for an adult audience. I guess she started writing YAs, or children's mid-grade children books. And so when she started writing adult books, she used a pen name to distinguish them as, you know, maybe not entirely the same reading level as the kids' books. And one of them was a new release, which was Nettle and Bone. And that's her, like, all the stories where, you know the princess is relatable because she doesn't like doing embroidery. And like, ugh, she doesn't do embroidery like other girls. She wants to do sword fighting and da-da-da-da-da. So she wrote a fantasy adventure starring a princess who just wanted to be left alone to do her embroidery. Like, that was her vision of life and happiness. Was she had been sent off to a convent. She hadn't taken vows, but she lived in the convent and she did embroidery for political reasons. She had to be stashed out of the way. And then, you know, she found she had to go on an adventure and leave all that safety behind. And that was really good. So I had another one of her books in my to be read pile. And then that one is a standalone in a world where she has a duology and then a trilogy. So I read the duology, which time-wise comes first, and then I read the trilogy, and I just finished the trilogy the other night, and I was like, no, you can't end there, because it's a trilogy. The duology is a proper duology. It's 2 books, half of the story and then the other half of the story. The trilogy is more like a romance novel trilogy or series where each book is about a different person, but then time, you know, like time has passed from one book to the next to the other. And then having had 2 books that had their whole thing and they're resolved, at the end of the 3rd book, suddenly she drops a cliffhanger in the epilogue. And I was just like, oh no! So every time I reach for my Kindle now, I'm wanting to read more of the Paladin books by T. Kingfisher, and that has made it hard to start something new. But I have another Seanan McGuire new release. Seanan McGuire writes like if she didn't write, she would die. Which as I understand, is something the way her brain is broken, that is a thing her brain tells her. Like if she ever stopped writing, she wouldn't be worth anything, is my understanding. But she writes at a difficult to maintain level because it keeps her brain from going crackers. And so I've got another book by her that came out just a few weeks ago, which is another one in the Tobey Maguire urban fantasy, fae and fairies and that kind of stuff, that series. And I've got a few other books. I've got a bunch of books to read, and I just need my brain to stop reaching for the Paladin books before I can read them. And yeah, so that's a bit of what I've been reading. I will maybe put some covers up, hopefully, as I was talking, if I have the energy to do a lot of editing on this video, which I just might not. But yeah, that I think kind of catches us up on what we have been doing. And oh, I didn't tell you about the cat. We have a third cat. If you were watching a year ago, I did a video where I said, hey, we've got this stray who's been living in our garden, and it's, you know, we started feeding it. It was eating out of the compost, which is in the corner there. We do not put any animal product stuff in the compost. If we have any leftovers of that nature, we feed them to the crows. So there was nothing in there that an obligate carnivore should have been eating. And it wasn't like he was hunting mice. He was just eating straight out of the compost. And so we started putting cat food out, and, you know, eventually he let us come close, and then he wound up being just like this absolute sunshine cat who was always delighted to see us and purring and would run over and give you headbutts in the garden. And between the time I recorded the video saying, hey, this is Milo, I didn't say he was Milo because we didn't know his name at the time, but, you know, hey, this is the stray cat in our garden. And when I was able to upload it the next day, the people from the Cat Protection Society came out and scanned his chip and said he'd been missing for 6 months and whooshed him back to give to his people. And we said, could you please give them my email address so they can send us pictures or, you know, like let us know that he's okay. Never heard anything from them. A year, almost to the day, it was one day off being exactly a year from when we first noticed him eating in the compost pile, Milo came back. So Milo has been living mostly in our garden. We have been feeding him. He loves us muchly. I called, he showed up acting like he was starving again, like he just fell on his food, like he hadn't eaten in at least a week. Which, like, our cats pretend they've never been fed. But then you give them the food and they're like, oh, good, food. Yeah, nope, that's fine. Whereas, because one of my cats has food insecurity, so he really has to know where his food is to feel calm. But he doesn't necessarily have to eat it. So Milo ate like he hadn't been getting enough food. And yeah, we're delighted Milo is back. I called the cat protection people and said, hey, a year ago, you helped rehome this cat and now he's here again. Do you think you can contact his people and say we have him? And they're like, well, we don't really have the resources to send someone out. If you know he has a chip, just take him to the vet. So I had an appointment for our cats, their annual checkup anyway, and I will try to put him in a box. Milo did not want to go in a box. Milo said, no, thank you, to going in a box. So I went to the vet and I said, you know, if we buy a chip reader, can we give you the chip number? You can call Milo's people, give them my phone number, and they can call us and we'll figure out what's going on. And they said, yeah, that's a thing we can do. So we did. And assuming the vet people did give them our phone number, they have not called us. If the vet people were not able to get a hold of them, they did not call us back to say they were not able to get a hold of them. I did call yesterday to say, hey, I called last week. Is it possible for you to verify that you did, did you get a hold of them? Were you not able to get a hold of them? And they were like, I was not here last week, but I will look into it. And I've not heard anything back. So that's where things stand with Milo. He is just such a handsome gray tuxedo kitty. Yeah, so I don't know what's going on there. We're happy to adopt him if his people don't want him. If his people do want him, it's probably best we have their number if he's going to be running away to find us every year. I don't know what's going on there. Yeah, so like if the problem is if Milo needs medical care and he's living outside in the garden right now. So like if he gets run over by a car, so then we have to take him to the vet. When we get there, I don't think they can let us take him home again at the end. I'm sure they'll let us pay for it, but I don't really know. Or, you know, like if he just needs basic care. So yeah, he's not our cat. If we go on holiday, we can't take him to a cattery because he's not our cat and we don't have a record of his vaccinations. We can't get him vaccinated because he's not our cat. But yeah, we would very much like to know what's going on with Milo so that we can make more permanent arrangements. Anyway, I drank an entire cup of tea and then sat down and talked with you, or drank some while sitting down with you. I need to run to the ladies' room. I hope you are having a good month since last I spoke to you. I hope this can be a more regular thing soon. I hope I stop losing my voice. I have been able to go running a few times. I think I'd gone running 2 times when I recorded the video, and then I lost my voice again and couldn't go running for a while because it was part of having a cold. My Kindle just turned off. And yeah, I've gone running a few times. I've been riding my bike. I've been hopefully not get another cold that makes me not able to do all the things that help me feel like me, including having this podcast. If you made it this far, please give me a thumbs up. Thumbs up tells YouTube to recommend me to other people. I do not feel the need to be internet famous even slightly, but I would like to reach enough people that this feels less like talking to myself and feels more like talking to my friends. Although talking to myself clearly has never bothered me. Yeah, so if you like it, give it a thumbs up, recommend it to other people. If not, that's cool. You probably didn't make this far anyway. Thank you very much for watching. I will talk to you again whenever I can next do this. Bye.